Is it possible to make a game about only jumping fun? How can we take something mundane like jumping, not even any left or right movement, just jumping, and make it fun, unique, and exciting? Jumping in games is a common feature, but as an experiment, take your favorite platformer game and just keep jumping. How long does it stay fun and interesting? Yeah, not very long. How about jumping in real life? Try jumping in place for the next 60 seconds. Also not very fun and tiring. With the core mechanic of the game being jumping, I want to make something that isn't just hit the button and the character jumps. Let's create something more interesting. You know in games like Mega Man X where you can charge your shot and the longer you hold the button, the bigger the energy blast is? Let's try something like that, but with jumping. Now the longer the player holds the jump button, the higher the character will jump. To give the player some visual feedback, let's add a slider to the character to show when the jump is fully charged. With this simple mechanic, I feel like the game is already more fun than just jumping in a typical platformer. Now we have a game where a rectangle can jump. Let's continue to make it more interesting. Since this game is all about jumping, let's reward the player for performing that action. Rewarding in games is a good way to incentivize a player to do certain actions, whether it is finding treasure through exploration or epic loot for beating a boss. In this case, we want to reward the player for jumping. Progression bars in games are an easy way to reward the player. I mean, who doesn't like to level up after beating a bunch of enemies? Let's add a level up bar at the bottom of the screen, and every time the player jumps, if they've charged the jump at least a quarter of the way, they will get XP depending on how long they charged the jump. Every time the character levels up, they will be able to jump a little higher. You might not notice the difference right away, but once you get to higher levels, there will be a dramatic difference, which will come in handy later on. On top of that, let's also reward the player when they time the jump perfectly with the charge meter. It's basically like a timed attack in an RPG game, but with jumping. If the player perfectly times their jump, they will gain an additional amount of jump height. Let's also throw a little bit of risk reward in there, and if the player overcharges the jump, they won't jump or receive any XP. This is something like Roy's neutral special in Smash Bros. It's a really strong move, but if you charge for too long, you end up getting punished for it. We are putting an emphasis on jumping at the correct time to get the most out of the jumps. If you take the risk to get that extra jump boost rewarded to you and overshoot your target, you have to pay the consequences. By doing this, we're kind of creating a game within a game. Next, we need to give the player an objective. Games and objectives go hand in hand. Beat the boss to save the princess. Solve the puzzle to continue to the next area. Or in the case of my game, Toaster Defense, which you should wishlist on Steam, I would really appreciate that. Protect the cute toaster at all cost. We need to give the player an objective and a reason to jump. Let's create some enemies that move towards the player. We could make the objective to jump over the enemies, and that would make sense because the sole purpose for this game is jumping. However, with that in mind, I don't want to take away from the jumping mechanic with the health system. I want the character to jump and only jump. That is the main focal point of the character. Plus, I think jumping over enemies is pretty boring. We want to destroy them, not avoid them. Let's make it a little more unique and create these towers that the enemies are trying to destroy. And our objective is to protect them. But how can we protect them if all we can do is jump, I hear you say? Don't worry, I have a solution. We are going to create an object that shoots out projectiles every time you jump on it. I also gave it a cooldown meter so we can't just spam projectiles. Instead, the player will need to time their jumps with the meter to shoot at enemies. To top it off, the longer the player is in the air, the faster the projectile will be when hitting the button. The game is pretty fun, but we need to challenge the player. We can't make the game too easy because players will get bored, and we can't make it too hard because players will get frustrated. Balancing difficulty in a game is actually really tricky. Right now, there's just a single floor where enemies come from. To increase the difficulty and show our true malicious intent, we will not add only one more floor, but two. The player must protect the towers on all 3 floors. If one tower blows up, it's game over. Fortunately, you don't have to fret for our player. These additional floors are on gracious timers so that the enemies won't spawn until about the time the player's jump should be ready to reach the new heights. After playing and adjusting countless settings, the game feels fun and unique with just the right amount of challenge, and you can really get into a groove if you get your timings right. The problem right now is that it looks freaking ugly. Obviously, a way to make a game more interesting is to have interesting graphics. Let's start on that by creating some art and throw this placeholder junk to the side. Ah, yeah, much better. I created a fun little sci-fi scene because, I mean, who doesn't like sci-fi? Now we have little evil blue bombs to destroy and better looking towers and turrets. However, just slapping some art in the game isn't the stopping point. We can continue to polish the game using particle effects, sound effects, and a lovely camera shake. We now have fun and exciting particle effects, from the blast of lightning when you time your perfect jump to big tower explosions. Last thing we can do to make this scene more interesting is post-processing and lighting. Now that's looking real freaking good. The game is finally starting to come together and is almost complete. Last thing I want to do to wrap things up with this is create some friendly competition for all of you. I'm very quickly going to write a score script so that every time you destroy a bomb, you get a point. And I'm going to add a little particle effect in there to show a little +1 to show that you've gotten a point. This game will be available to play on itch.io, so when you play the game and rack up a large score, why don't you go ahead and post your score in the comments and we'll see who is the best jumper. So what do you think? Did we succeed? Did we make a fun, exciting, unique game just about jumping? I'd love to hear what you guys think about it in the comments below. Also, if you want to learn more about game development, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, click the bell, all those fun things. I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching so much. I'll see you next time.